Hello, everyone. Welcome to PolitiFest 2020, Pick Your Future. I'm Lisa Halverstad, and I'm a reporter for Voice of San Diego. We're so glad to have you with us tonight. In case you're not familiar with Voice of San Diego, we're a nonprofit investigative news outlet committed to holding local leaders accountable and giving you the information that you need to make important decisions and advocate for the public good. As a nonprofit, we do depend on members and donors to make this work possible, and we thank you for your support. I'd also like to take a moment to recognize our sponsors who help make PolitiFest possible. Special thanks to Google News Initiative for supporting the creation of this virtual event, to the College of Arts and Sciences at USD for underwriting all student tickets, and to the San Diego Foundation for supporting our community conversations. Also, thank you to Cox Communications, SDG&E, the Atlantis Group, City of San Diego Retired Employees Association, City Heights CDC, the San Diego County Democratic Party, and Business for Good. And special kudos to the Democratic Party for sponsoring this session on what Dems might do with control of county government. Now, remember, there are events through noon Saturday. Check the schedule on the event website for more details. We're offering several sessions for free, as well as some in both English and Spanish. To learn more about that, go to the sessions tab in the event website to see all your options. We do have a lot of great sessions. We know you can't attend them all. Luckily, you will be able to watch recordings of all of them on our site. They'll be available by noon the following day. And you can also use the online event guide on CVNet to connect with other attendees and learn about speakers and sponsors. And also be sure to get your own VOSD mug or drinking glass. I'll provide some links in just a moment. Now, before we get started, we really want to encourage you to share your comments and questions. You can put those questions in the comment box to your right. And as a reminder, everyone's camera and mic, except for our moderator and panelists, is turned off and muted. We also highly recommend, if you're a Twitter person, that you tweet along with this session and share your experience by using the hashtag PolitiFest2020 on social media. Okay, without further ado, I'd like to introduce VOSD Editor-in-Chief Scott Lewis, who will moderate this session tonight and introduce our panelists.
Thanks, Lisa. That's awesome. Appreciate you introducing us. We have a lot to go through tonight. I'm very excited to be here. First point of order, it is completely okay. It is totally encouraged to be watching the Padres game right now. This isn't a serious debate. We can talk and have a great discussion and a conversation. Hold on, I got the white thing right. We can have a great conversation while also making sure that our beloved Padres feel the support from across the city, as we all hope that this season doesn't end tonight. let's bring on our panelists for the night. We've got Nora Vargas. She is running for the County Board of Supervisors, District 1, former executive at Planned Parenthood, and a Southwestern College trustee. Welcome, Nora. How are you?
I'm good. I'm happy that people are joining us. I want to be watching the Potter game too.
Yeah, I'll keep you updated. We'll be all right. It's looks like the fourth or fifth. Yeah, fifth inning, top of the fifth.
All right.
All right, and we'll bring on County Supervisor Nathan Fletcher. He's hot off his last discussion. Not really a debate, but a pretty interesting, somewhat contentious discussion about there's this virus going around, kind of a thing. Nathan, this is you've been to every PolitiFest since we were in Liberty Station. This is a little weird.
Can we just take a moment to walk down memory lane back to the very first PolitiFest out in the field at Liberty Station.
Yeah.
And we had mayoral debate. And Scott, out of a desire to open up the treasure of PolitiFest to everyone, said any candidate can show up. There was no threshold to qualify.
My commitment to democratic principles.
So we had the guy on the Star Trike. Do you remember his name? I can't remember his name. What was his name?
David Crane, very famous Beach resident. Yes.
HUD, I think HUD was there. HUD Collins.
HUD Collins.
Do you remember Girly Girl? That he said, I'm a man, but I legally changed my name to Girly Girl. He was running to empower women.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had the guy who was ahead of his time on cannabis, who told the whole crowd he was so committed to cannabis that he smoked a fat bowl in the parking lot before he came up on stage. And then you had me and Bob Filner.
Yeah. Yeah, and you lost. Okay.
No, I don't know if I lost the race.
Yeah, right.
I think my life turned out better than most folks on that stage.
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe I have his ankle bracelet off, but I
Yeah. All right. Well, this is a PolitiFest unlike anything else. I can't thank you guys both enough for being here. Thank you. Let's have a good conversation. Nathan, you came out of that discussion. It was all about the politics around reopening. Well, we made sure there was a scientist there to kind of keep things real. But let's talk first of all about the public health crisis. If two more Democrats come onto the board, and that's what we're talking about, is a lot of discussion about how this board may change directions. It seems like it could be either far more conservative than it is now, or it could be far more progressive liberal on the other side. And so this is a really interesting moment. We're talking about what happens if that latter situation occurs. We hear a lot about the consequences that might come, but let's actually get them to work, because I'm not sure I could actually lay them out. But let's talk first about the public health situation. Two more Democrats on the board. Are there any public health decisions that would be different, would have come out differently, had you and other Democrats been in charge of the board?
Well, I think from one, you're spot on about the change. I've been able in large part to get a lot of things done over the last year and a half because of a partnership with Diane Jacob, who is, if Teddy Roosevelt were alive today, she is the embodiment of that truly progressive, not in what it meant back then, era. And I have great respect for her and Greg Cox, and both of those folks are gone. And so it is a choice of, you're either going to have three very pro-Trump Republicans in charge of the county, or you're going to have three Democrats, progressive, in charge of the county. And so it is a significant, it's going to go one way or the other, and there won't be any mushy middle, to be very clear. But your question on the public health, I think, is one area where I've had a significant split from my colleagues. And the willingness to not only listen to public health doctors and scientists, but to actually hear them and be willing to make difficult decisions to support that. I think if we'd had more Democrats on the board, it would have happened. In June, there was a series of 4-1 votes where I was the lone no vote, not because I didn't want to reopen things, but because I feared if we reopen all of these things at this time in this order, we're going to spike our cases and we're going to reclose them. And that was the worst thing economically. And so I think if we'd had three Democrats, I think we would have been much faster and much quicker to address equity issues of testing in South Bay. I think we're doing better now, and we're certainly doing better than most counties in California, but I think it would have been earlier and faster of higher mind. I think there would have been a higher focus. We might have fought harder for schools than the county did for bars. And I think that we would not have repeated in August what I believe was the same mistake we made in June. And we would have more reflected the approach of some of the counties like San Francisco that have had a smoother and more consistent trajectory. So I do think the response would have been different.
Well, and I mean, I would add, having someone on the board who actually has a public healthcare background is a very unique experience, right? Because I'm on the ground doing this work for over 20 years. And so for me, things that would have been natural would have been thinking about making sure that there was information in language, right? For our Latino communities, it would have been natural to ask the tough questions about why are we funding based on population and not based on need, and why are we continuing to politicize healthcare in our communities, knowing that in District 1 we had already had these disparities even before COVID hit, right? And so I think it makes a difference. Testing issue would have been something that I think I would have brought up, and what does that mean for essential workers, right? Because the folks who live in La Jolla, folks who live in North County, the majority, right? And what we're hearing, Desmond, and from Supervisor Gaspar, it's a very different perspective than what the needs of the communities of District 1 folks are, which is our essential workers. They didn't have the luxury of staying home and being on Zoom and teaching their kids. They actually had to go out and put their lives in danger and be the ones on the front lines. And those things would have come naturally, and Super Fletcher would have been on his own advocating for this.
Do you think the supervisors, your colleagues, Cox, Jacob, Gaspar, and Desmond, were blind to that, what Nora just described, Supervisor Fletcher? And just to address something, we did invite State Senator Ben Hueso to come on. He declined. We also invited, of course, Kristen Gaspar, the incumbent county supervisor, to debate Tara Lawson-Remer, and she declined, and Tara Lawson-Remer did not want to participate in this one. So Nathan, yes, back to that. Do you think those colleagues of yours on the board were just necessarily or willfully blind to those concerns?
Well, I think one of the problems and the reason that you need a more diverse board is there's more diverse perspectives, and there's folks that are more in tune with different communities. And I think what we have now is at times a board that is very responsive to restaurant or business interest or bar interest, but is a little bit out of touch with the reality of what we see. When you have a population, Scott, when you have a Latino population that is 30% of the population and more than 60% of the cases, that tells you that there is a problem right there. And then that tells you, and not taking into account historic inequities. I mean, it is a point of incredible privilege where you think the biggest problem facing us is how quickly can we get golf courses reopened?
Yeah.
As opposed to saying how quickly can we make sure that people that have never historically had access to healthcare can get access to healthcare, or people who are afraid because of their immigration status, but yet still have to go to work because our economy depends on them. How do we make sure they get tested? Or how do we care as much about, look, if you're a parent and you just say, well, my kid's going to get on their MacBook Pro on their high-speed broadband with their private tutor that I brought in, well, maybe that works for you.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't feel the need to figure out how we try and make that work. But for so many families, that's not a reality. That's a myth. They don't have a MacBook Pro, and they don't have a high-speed Wi-Fi, and they don't have a private tutor. And by the way, those parents have to go to work.
Yeah.
The kids are home. So I think there's a different perspective, and that's what I think as the board turns over, is it, people used to tell me, oh, you went and made the board partisan. It used to be nonpartisan. It didn't used to be nonpartisan. It used to be unipartisan.
Yeah.
And I think that different perspective is needed. And I think it's going to be significantly added to after.
And I would, right? I mean, I think it's, the argument that people keep making is that 2 Democrats that are running for the seat in District 1, and so it doesn't matter. But it does matter, because I'm not a supervisor, and even not being a supervisor, have been able to create platforms in English and Spanish so we can get the information. Not a supervisor, but brought in 25 nonprofits throughout the county that are like the service providers, Chicano Federation, San Isidro, all non-political, but brought them in so we can talk about what the needs were. And we were able to get the SANDAG, data so that we can see, like, how do we create public policy that actually is going to be responsive to the needs of the community versus waiting to hear. And all we heard is, we need to talk about this, and businesses are a part of it, right? But economic recovery has to have conversations about what is the safety nets look like? How do we make sure that they have what they need? Because wait, we can do all the contact tracing we want, but our communities don't trust somebody from the county calling them. They don't, because they don't trust government. And so I think we have a responsibility to make sure we're making the connections with the folks that are on the ground already, so that they're the ones that are doing this work. And it has happened now, but it wasn't an immediate solution. And I think those are the kinds that do make a difference. And it depends on your experience and your knowledge. And I've been somebody who's been on the ground with the community, for 20 years doing this. So it's something that becomes natural for me as of town halls. That's what we do, bring people together. And we saw it at Southwestern College, right? That's what we did immediately. We opened up our parking lot so that people can have access to Wi-Fi, because there was no access to our students. And so, I'm ashamed to say that our students are in their parking lot doing this work, but it's important, I think, to make sure that we have these different perspectives.
Well, all right, let's think about how this might go. So talk to us a little bit about how the Board of Supervisors work, Nathan. You, if there is another Democrat elected, you would have Democrats as a majority. I would assume you guys would try to vote together for the leadership of the board and various policies. Would there be a difference? Because right now the chairperson of the Board of Supervisors kind of rotates. Right? They do it every year. Or they used to. Well, not to you.
Yeah. No. Look, let's just be honest about it. If everyone there is a Republican, then you just rotate it amongst yourself. I am under no illusion that if the Republicans have the majority, it would rotate to me. Nor do I think it should. The speakership of the Congress doesn't rotate amongst all the members of Congress. The president of the Senate doesn't rotate. This is democracy, and I think if Republicans win 3 seats on the Board of Supervisors, the chair of the Board of Supervisors ought to be a Republican. And if we win 3 seats, then the chair ought to be, I believe, a Democrat.
Is that actual policy right now, or is that just? It's
more of a practice. It's more of a practice. The kind of the order in which people see it, and they move. And they've deviated it from the past when they didn't like, Pam Slater Price or something. It's more of a practice that I think is really reflective of a difference in governing. And look, I think in large part counties are unique structures in that we're political subdivisions of the state. We're 5 folks. We're legislative and executive. It is closest to if you imagined a city manager form of government absent an elected mayor, in terms of how we function. But I think a part of the change, Scott, that I think is important for the board moving forward, some of it's ideological. I want 3 Democrats, but some of it is more active. I want us to be more aggressive as a county government. We have a tremendous ability to impact what is happening in San Diego County. We have a tremendous ability to step up. We're an almost $7 billion a year entity with 18,000 employees. And I think we need to be more aggressive, more assertive. And I think we need a board that is more involved in governing decisions. That is more prescriptive on the change we would like to see, what we would like to have that happen. Now, let me ask you, if you think 3 Democrats would agree all the time, you haven't been around Democrats very much.
No, sure. Well, let me ask you just quickly about that. The decision then to vote for you, or for anybody on there to be chair, is that something you would just do right away? And then
January swearing in.
And then what you're saying there is that you would immediately start to do more with the staff. You're saying the staff kind of runs the direction at the moment?
Well, I think historically, and you can count up, we govern via board letter, right? You docket a board letter. And I think if you go and you look at
what does that mean? Sorry, go for it.
Well, that's kind of how you introduce legislation at the county is you docket, you agendize an item for a vote by your colleagues. And so I think if you look at the volume of things, I think I've certainly brought a different approach than what is historically the norm. I think when you look at, are we going to tackle controversial, difficult subjects? I think it is indisputable that we have done significantly more difficult, controversial things in the last year and a half than in the preceding 10 years. When you look at the split vote nature, and in large part, instead of just saying, well, why don't you go figure out how we can do more to tackle mental health? I think we bring an approach where we're all going to have ideas. No, I want a $25 million behavioral health impact fund, and here's how it's going to work. And so it is a more aggressive, more assertive board. I also think, and then I'll stop on this point. I think term limits, which I don't ideologically love, but I think term limits do have some positive impact in that you're not going to be here for 30 years. And so if you want to get something done and you want to make a mark in an area, you got a clock ticking in your head. And you're like, I got to move on this issue. And I think that's one potential positive.
And I think, I would add that I think one of the uniqueness of the Board of Supervisors here, people sort of create their projects, right? This is what I'm going to be championing. And that's like, and you do it every year. You're like, and that every time you have a new chair, that's what they're championing the whole year. So there goes the whole administration, like following what that is. We really need to think about this as what is our long-term, 4-year, short-term and long-term, what do we accomplish here? And I think that having 3 Democrats on the board and finding the other Republican that's going to be able to address issues around childcare, issues around housing, issues around seniors, I think it'll make a difference. And I think together we can really think about what are our priorities so that we can move this county forward. Because my district hasn't had a new representative in 5 years, right? And they never had someone with my background on there, and so. As soon as I get there, I want to hit the ground running and be a good partner with, Fletcher and hopefully Tara, so that we can move an agenda, because my community doesn't have any more time. We've been waiting for a long, long time, and those two, Supervisor Greg Cox being out there in the community and doing well, but the population in District 1 changed, and already continues, housing, rent continues to increase. There's so many issues in our community that we need to address now. Our community are dying. So when I talk about mitigating COVID, that has to be a priority. It's not just, a bumper sticker that we create. It really does have to be a priority for us. And what does that look like for resources for the community?
I think that point is taken. I think there's a real opportunity for at least that side. Now, Nathan, one of the things I've tried to explain over the years what the county does. There's a lot of pass through for food assistance, for health care. There's a lot of decision making and administration that needs to go along with that. But for a long time, it's been what I use just the majority, the large majority of what the county does is some sort of version of administering state or national stuff. Is that a fair thing to say?
Well, in part, it's technically a true statement, but Scott, there is tremendous latitude in terms of determining the effectiveness of those programs. And I'll give you an example. Our county has historically just shit all over the state government. They're the worst, they're the awful, they make our life difficult and hard. I take a very different approach. Look, I've drawn down tens of millions of dollars of state funding for programs that I thought are important. And I'll give you a specific example. Of an area of where there's a different mindset. My highest priority is rebuilding our behavioral health system, our mental health and drug treatment service programs. The whole thing is broke, and that's not necessarily entirely the county's fault. It's culturally, systemically, legally, all these types of things. But a part of that is we'll say, well, we just administer the Medi-Cal program. No, we can shape the Medi-Cal program. And prior to COVID, I probably had a dozen different meetings with the governor, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, with health plans, about how we wanted to shape the CalAIM waiver process with the 1115B to create incredible opportunities where we can do in lieu fees, where we can actually start funding behavioral health services in a totally different way and rebuild our system. And so there are so many opportunities.
You have to define the term you used, the Killian what? What was
CalAIM. CalAIM is essentially the process by which you establish the Medi-Cal reimbursement system in California.
So you can have providers that get money to do. Yeah,
exactly. But that's where we can just throw up our hands and say, well, it just is what it is. No, let's go shape it to make it the way we want it based on the policy outcomes we want. Another example is how do we view ourselves as a regional leader and work with other entities? So, we had a dilapidated piece of county-owned property on 3rd Avenue. They were going to build luxury condos. We said no. We were going to build behavioral health hubs. We went and partnered with UCSD, UC San Diego Health Systems to change the licensure agreement at the psych hospital. But we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars drawn down to build a regional network of hubs that are going to impact. So the notion that some supervisors have espoused in the past, that including Supervisor Gaspar, that, well, there's not really a lot to do, it's just kind of all on autopilot, is fundamentally wrong. And every level of government has some administrative functioning upon which you just kind of run this program. But I think there is so much opportunity for the county to be a huge player in tackling homelessness and the housing issues, obviously the impact on our regional transportation agencies and entities, on the environment. We don't spend nearly enough time talking about air quality challenges and issues with the Air Pollution Control District and water quality. We have real problems with stormwater, the climate action plan regionally. And so this is a board that needs a board of supervisors committed to spending the time, making the difficult decisions. And that, I think, is a part of the cultural change, get us out of this mindset of, we just kind of tinker and administer and then give out some nonprofit money, to say, no, let's be a part of driving an agenda regionally, partner with the mayor, with other mayors, with other cities.
Nora, is there anything else you would do to this latitude, or take more latitude from what is required or mandated from the state and the federal government?
Absolutely. But I think the other piece that we haven't talked about is the voice of the community, right? I mean, I think that's the piece that in this county has been missing for a while, because a lot of the decisions are made top down versus from communities up. And if we're going to change things, we need to make sure that the communities are part of it. I mean, think about the fact that during these budget hearings, I mean, we now have budget hearings in the evening, but that's something great. I mean, it should be a given, right? It should be given. Our people are working from 8 to 5. They don't get to go to meetings at 10 o'clock in the morning. And we be out there and bringing the county up to the communities versus people having, I mean, if you live in Chula, it takes you 2 hours to get on a bus to get to Pacific Highway. I mean, it's tough. It's not an easy thing to do. So government has to be accessible to people. And that's what I want to do, right? Coming back and coming out. I mean, I do have the experience working at the federal, state, and local level, fighting the budgets. I think the budget process is going to be a big one next year, because of depending on where we're going to end with the state and the COVID implications. Prop 15 hopefully will bring additional dollars to communities. I think that's important, and to county resources, as well as to our education as well. But I think that's the biggest issue. When you talk about Medi-Cal, I mean, still are like the 48th, 49th in the nation in terms of reimbursement. So we can talk all we want about public health care. If we are not changing, we're not going to have enough people to provide the services so that people have access that they need. And so for me, it's really looking at things holistic perspective, and community. The voices of our communities have to be part of it. And I think, Supervisor has done an exceptional job in really championing that work. But I'll tell you, we wouldn't have term limits. We wouldn't have elections in November if it wasn't for the folks that did that work on the ground, right? The nonprofit organizations, the organizers on the ground, who were really the ones that have changed the face of this opportunity to have a change on the board. That's the only way it has happened.
Yeah. I wonder what we might be able to talk about with homelessness. There's been an assumption, and behavioral health is obviously related, but there's been an assumption that, and kind of amplified by like the mayor of San Diego, that the city is in charge of hard facilities and that the county is in charge of soft facilities, like the healthcare or the mental health issues, or the maybe even food and other social assistance, and that the city was in charge of these actual shelters. Is that true? And is that something that would be adjusted with a Democratic-led county board?
Well, I think it is one of the challenges with homelessness is there's no one entity solely responsible for it. If you don't like how your roads, you know who to blame. And the problem with homelessness is that. And then the second problem is it's not something you actually have to address. Is on Gavin's task force on homeless, it was an incredible group of folks, and we came to the realization the only way we're going to substantively address the issue of homelessness is to create a legally enforceable obligation that says you have to address it. We have the Clean Air Act, which says your air has to be clean to this measure, or you're in non-attainment. You got to take these actions. We have the Voting Rights Act, which spells things out. We have public schools. Every kid in California has a seat in a public, not in COVID, but prior to that. No, not all schools are equally good, but there's not a crisis of second graders who don't have a school to go to, because you have to do it. And when you have to do it, it forces you to make it happen. And I think I want to revisit us moving forward with that as a state. But I think your point, and it ties back a little bit, Scott, to what you said earlier, the county has city-like obligations in the unincorporated areas where we do things that cities do. We build roads and libraries and pick up trash and all those types of things. But countywide, we have a tremendous obligation around social services and around behavioral health for the Medi-Cal population, particularly those that are what we call SMI, serious mental illness. They actually come into our plan. And I think we need to be more aggressive and more assertive in driving solutions around that. And we need to be better partners to the cities that are going to try and build the structure, and then the county to come in. And a good example where this works is around Project Home Key. We worked with the city to put together the proposal and with the Housing Commission to get these motels. And then I added millions of dollars in the budget for dedicated services specifically to these locations. And I think that's how it works. The convention
just quick interruption. So Project Home Key, describe that. This is money from the state?
From the state. Yeah, this is money from the state to come in. You know, there was an early recognition there was probably going to be a significant, obviously a significant short-term impact on the motel industry, and I think it'll have longer-term effects.
Right.
And that some of these would become available. You know, if you own a motel and you're staring down, you're not going to have any occupancy for 2020. You're not sure about 2021, and you honestly don't know beyond that. Maybe you would take cash to sell. And the benefit of that is a motel type setting, you can very rapidly transition into permanent supportive housing, but you've got to have the wraparound services. So the state made the money available. The cities had to find a location in their jurisdiction. And then the county had to step in to say, we're going to provide the mental health and drug treatment services to make that facility work. And we docketed an item. It was millions of dollars, but we were able to build support. And I think we need to do that more aggressively and more assertively to help address the challenges of homelessness regionally.
Yeah. And, you know, and add that everything that we do sometimes as government is crisis management, right? Versus why aren't we doing prevention? And county has a great opportunity to do a lot more work on prevention, and we have that opportunity, right? We can have these programs in our schools with our trusted networks for our parents, where we're actually providing the social services. It's really going back to the concept of meeting people where they're at, right? We're bringing in mental health care providers, nurses from the county that are able to provide those services for our kids when they need it at a young age. In our communities, when it comes to mental health, especially communities of color, you know, stigma is a huge issue. People don't want to talk about mental health, and it's also a luxury to be able to go to a therapist, right? It's a luxury for many people. If you don't have access to healthcare, the last thing you're thinking about is that you're going to take care of your mental health. Yeah. Mental health has to be healthcare, and we need to think about it from lens. How do we look at our each young person, family, from a holistic perspective to make sure that they have the services that they need to meet their basic needs? And that's one of the really interesting about representing District 1, right? As a representative for District 1, one of the big focuses is basic needs for our communities. Our communities are still really disconnected from being to have what they need to be able to have a quality of life. And the disparity between the areas of Coronado to East Chula Vista are very different, right? And so I think that's going to be a challenge as we're moving forward.
Nathan, I have a question. Years ago, we did some investigative work about how far behind the city of the county of San Diego was in delivering food assistance and other kinds of assistance like that compared to other counties, medical help and everything. And there was some adjustments. There's been a lot of improvement. They focused on it for a long time. They tout that. Is everyone who could use this kind of assistance, medical or food, in the county of San Diego who would want it, but are there people out there who are not getting it, and what could happen to change that?
Well, I think, look, it's gotten better. I mean, it was really bad, and I think it's gotten better. But again, you know, Scott, that requires a mindset that says, you know, we still struggle a little bit with the mindset here, and I want to be clear, like, if I were a part of a 3-vote Democratic majority, no one's going to bankrupt the county, right? We're going to make wise fiscal decisions. The day I was sworn in the legislature, more than a decade ago, I had a $42 billion deficit on a $100 billion total, still the largest budget deficit in California history, and that's miserable. And you avoid that by having responsible reserves. But I think there's a mindset shift that has to happen, which is that we are here to provide a service. We're not here to figure out, you know, how can we, you know, build the most things while maintaining the highest possible level of reserves. And then how do we view ourselves as that service provider? By getting out into the communities in culturally competent ways. Look, we had a big fight this year, Scott. I'll give you a specific example, ties directly to this, over translation services.
Yep.
How do we make sure everything we do as a county is in the language that people speak? Because we'll take your tax money. We don't care what language you speak when you pay your taxes. We'll take your money. It's only when it comes to your ability to access that same government you paid for that we put up these barriers. Well, why in 2020 are we fighting to make sure that documents are available in the threshold languages? Well, how many people who don't speak English as their primary language are not able to access what we have because we don't make it easy? And so I do think there's a long way to go to make sure we're having a county government that is truly serving everyone in a progressive or aggressive or assertive or whatever one of those three or all three you want to take. And so I think it's a mindset shift that has to continue to happen. And I view success as, how do we draw down every possible state and federal dollar we possibly can? And so if we got to spend a quarter to pick up a dollar, we ought to be doing that. Yep. And we sign those folks up for those available state and federal programs. We're not only helping that life and that soul, but we are drawing more dollars into our community resource. And so, you know, I think we still have some kind of Stone era type restrictions around, you know, it's easy to say, well, we're going to put up all these barriers for fraud that is non-existent or never really happens, but does prevent a lot of people from being able to access them. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to be more effective in those programs.
Yeah, and I would add that I think, have you filled out that form before, right? You have to actually do it every year, like for CalFresh. And it's not, instead of opting in, you're having every year you have to go in and you share your information and where you're at. And if COVID has taught us anything, is that you actually can make these changes without so much bureaucracy. People this time around got an EBT card for $365, and the moms in San Isidro, the moms in Barrio Logan are now being able to use those cards to go to the kid and get the kids the food that they need. What we were doing before was giving them a card for $15, right? So now we've seen with COVID how government actually has been working for people in some instances. It waited for a bit. It's come back. It just came back again. So if you were eligible for breakfast or lunch at school, you automatically got that per child. The other part is that we have to make sure that there's some dignity in this process, right? I mean, here, come and wait in line for hours in the wet, like the weather, hot weather or the rain or wherever we're at, so that you can get a piece of food. Why aren't we doing this in such a way where people have a place where they can use something, they can go to the store and get what they need, so that they are treated the same way as everybody else? Because in the end, government should be a safety net, and that's, I think, what we're all trying to do. And I mean, that's the reason why I'm right. I mean, how do we make sure that people have basic needs met, and how do we get them what they need so that they can not just survive, but they will thrive? We want people to do well, because you're not going to get a good economy if a child is hungry and it's not sleeping and living in their cars.
Yeah. Let me ask you about employees. So the employees, the largest group of employees at the county is the SEIU 221. Their contract will be coming up for negotiation. You mentioned smart budgeting. I think they argue that they haven't been able to keep up with others, but there's going to be probably some pretty severe implications on the county budget, in maybe not this year, but soon, with all the relief money probably not continuing at this level. Maybe, I don't know, but it seems like there could be some severe pressure. How will you guys go through and balance that? You know, SEIU supported Supervisor Fletcher, Nora Vargas. You have not gotten the endorsement, but neither did Senator Ben Hueso, correct? So I'm just curious how that balance works. They are very big supporters of all the changes that have occurred at the county, but now you've got to negotiate against them or with them.
Well, yeah, I would just frame it as a negotiation is with your employees, and it is with the folks who clean the bathrooms, who sign people up, who take care of foster kids, who go out and do the work with all the collective bargaining units, not just with SEIU. Sure. And I think everyone has to take into account what are the budget realities we face, what are the impacts of what's on the horizon, and then you figure out a responsible way to address that and do that. And I think, you know, I've been through a lot of these situations, both at the state. I've been through previous ones here, you know, ones we did at MTS and other locations. And, you know, you sit down, you make a good faith effort to negotiate, and any negotiation, the individual is going to fight for the very best they possibly think they can get for their members. The job of elected officials is to figure out what's right for the county as a whole. And so we have to not lose sight of that when we do that. But, an important point, we're going to have an equity study that's going to go out and it's going to look at these issues in an objective way, compare us to other counties. And I think a part of it is going to be, what is the appropriate and fair compensation? But I think another area, Scott, that is really ripe for a robust discussion is, what is the role of services provided by county employees versus things that are contracted out? And what is the oversight and accountability on things that have been contracted out? And how might we get better outcomes? I think that there's been a mindset that cheaper, faster, better, we just contract it all out and you all get better results. And, I don't think that's worked well in our jails. And so I think there's a fair conversation to be had about that role in place as well. But, from my standpoint, we're always going to try to figure out what is best and right for the folks who depend on the services, and how do we treat our employees who do that work fairly.
I want to, Nora, I know that you have a take on that. I wanted to turn to some Q&As. Do you think we could get to those before we run out of time? There's a few in there. Do you want to finish your thought real quick?
I'll just say really quickly. So SEIU, the United Domestic Workers, right? The folks who are on the front lines, right. They're the ones that, I've done, tough budgeting, right? We're doing it right now at South College. We made sure that we got PPE and hazard for all of our employees. And it's about a choice, because budget should be a reflection of your values as a county. And I think that the county has not reflected that the workers are their priorities. I mean, we all know the story of Ms. Felder, who was a social worker who contracted COVID. And we can be much more, upfront about what that means. We're going to have to assess pensions as well, the pension issues next time around. And, if our workers are investing in us, we need to invest in them, right? That's what we need to do, because what we want is longevity, so that our county workers come to work every day ready to provide the best for our constituents and our communities. And they can't do that if they themselves are fighting and asking for, CalFresh, CalWorks, and basic healthcare services. And so I'm going to fight for our workers with or without their husband, because it's about working families, what I've done for years.
Okay. I'm going to bring Lisa Halverstadt back on. Not only is she really knowledgeable about these topics as well as someone who covers them, but she also has been monitoring the Q&A and the more Q side of things coming in the comments. Did any of them stand out, Lisa?
Yes. So I have the first question come from Orlando, who asked, with the climate action plan struck down for the second time, how would Democrats handle the cap differently for a third proposal?
I'll go brief and then I'll get Nora's thoughts. Maybe we ought to just have a cap consistent with the law. I mean, God almighty. They did one, it didn't work, lost in courts, we're going to try again, lost in courts, and lost and kept losing. And every time I say, I don't think we should appeal this, I think we're going to lose, we should just start over. And so we need a legally enforceable, legally compliant, accountable cap based on 2020 data. And then we need to make sure that we are aligning our land use efforts to be consistent with that.
Let me just ask about this. Like, was it the conservatives' influence on the Board of Supervisors that led it to not be in compliance?
Yeah, well, the board's the one who adopts it, but the board adopted it. So a supervisor could have said, hey, I don't think this is a good idea. I think we're going to have a problem here. And it wasn't like there was nobody out there pointing out like, hey, you got a problem here.
That's the question. But if the staff and the staff lawyers are like, this is good, like, you still need to challenge them.
You got to have the fortitude. And look, there's a number of times, and you can look out closed session reports where, there's a split vote on this. Diane, Jacob, and I were very aligned. We're going to lose the appeal. We're going to lose the appeal. We're going to lose the appeal. Let's just stop this nonsense. Let's get a cap that works. And you have to look, you get elected to govern and to take your own judgment, not to rubber stamp an internal recommendation that comes forward. And so I think that willingness to challenge that, and again, that willingness to listen to other perspectives. And when you have, a whole group of supervisors who all think, well, the Sierra Club's awful, when the Sierra Club's telling you, hey, you got a real problem here, maybe you need a few that are going to listen to them and analyze that and push back a little bit. And so, let's get out of the years of endless litigation over general plan amendments and cap, and let's get into some things that are legally enforceable, and let's start moving forward to lower our greenhouse gas emissions and do development that's consistent with the general plan.
Are there, and I want to hear from you, Nora, but are there staff that need to be replaced to make that possible in high positions?
Not to make it possible. The possibility is with the Board of Supervisors who make the decision.
All right, Nora.
And so I think Supervisor.
I mean, I think the board took a first step yesterday from the EJ perspective, which I think yesterday, I was actually really happy to see the final, they started having the conversation about what that looks like. And so the environmental justice piece is key because, when we're talking about all of these plans, we always think about them without actually looking at what it means to our communities of colors that for years have been impacted. And so I think the one piece is that they're, I serve on the board of Mothers Out Front, and the work that they're doing on the ground to make sure that we're addressing the injustices around air pollution and what that looks like for us, I think is key. And so we have to adopt the local governments have to adopt these elements in the plan. And I think National City did a great job as an inspiration for the law. And I think that we have to continue to move in action, but absolutely a priority.
Good. Thanks,
So,
Lisa.
Next question actually is related to what we were just talking about. Armando had a question related to environmental justice. He's wondering, how would Democrats increase the funding for parks and recreation and environmental services to deal with pollution issues, specifically in District 1?
Well, I'll jump in and then we'll kick it to Nora. I think the biggest opportunity to tackle issues of pollution is with the Air Pollution Control District. They are the ones that are statutorily responsible for regulating stationary sources. The Air Resources Board, which I'm also a member of, regulates mobile sources of air pollution. APCD regulates local ones. Look, we're like top 6 in the nation for highest ozone levels. Ozone is what causes asthma. And we need a more robust, I came on the board last year, I docketed an agenda item around toxic hotspots. We measure the numbers of cancer caused by polluting entities. And our threshold was 100 per million. The rest of the state, 3/4 of the state was at 10 per million or 25, much more aggressive level. And when I said we need to change this, no one knew how to, we don't know how to docket an APCD item because no supervisor had ever docketed an item for APC, Air Pollution Control District response. So there's a huge opportunity there in terms of tackling stationary sources of emission. And then there's obviously the work the Air Resources Board is going to continue to do.
Yeah, and and I will add, first and foremost, you have to actually elect somebody in District 1 who's not just a Democrat, but that actually supports environmental justice issues and is supported by the community, right? I mean, I have all the support of the Environmental Justice Action Campaign, Sierra Club, League of Conservation Voters, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it's important, Senator Hueso just took a position about 2 or 3 weeks ago around fracking, right? And the health impacts of that has statewide, specifically to Latinos and our Black communities. And so I think what we need first is to elect somebody who's actually a progressive, who understands what this means to our communities, and that we can't go back and forth and think about it from who is not putting the community first, number one. Number two, I think, for me, it's not just the parks and recreation that we do now, but look at the work that's being done around the community gardens and what that means. That builds community. It builds opportunity. It builds, many of our families don't have backyard, right? And so we, Asomember Gonzalez was one of the people opening up parks before everybody else, because we know what that is in our communities, where it's multi-generational communities, where folks don't have the access to a swimming pool in your backyard and or big areas to be playing around. And so for me, it's really looking at it from that lens, and what does that mean, so that we can bring those resources into our communities and are up with folks.
All right, Lisa, you say you have one more good one. Let's keep it to a minute or two each. And I think this has been a great discussion. I knew it would be fun. I appreciate it. Go ahead, Lisa.
So Amanda asked, what land use decisions can the county influence to reduce wildfire risk? Definitely something in the news lately.
Yeah, and just to be clear, there's still supervisors have to decide on numerous backcountry or unincorporated areas projects. We do have a severe housing need. Is that the right place for them, though? And then there's also the issue of, can people get insurance in some of these places? Seems like it's getting a lot harder.
Yeah, Well, no, Scott, the insurance thing is a great point. Is when you have a housing project where the insurance folks are like, we're not going to insure it. They're not saying we're going to charge you 10 times what you would normally say. They're saying there's no amount of money you can give us to make it worth us issuing a policy. That's what I call an indicator. Like that indicates maybe you ought not build there. And, you know, we're still hearing, we just heard recently a project where the fire chief was like, don't do this. It's not safe. You know, we had one where it was a 2-lane road in and there's thousands of people. And you said, well, how are you going to get everyone out? To the proponents. And they said, well, we're going to counterflow. We're going to go both lanes going out. And I said, well, how the hell are the fire trucks going to get in? Like, I mean, this is nutty. And so we fiscalized land use with these general plan amendments in areas where housing was specifically not designed for reasons like this. And instead of building where it belongs, you can come in and buy land that essentially has no value because you can't build on it. And you jam through a general plan amendment where if you can get 3 supervisors to vote, then you can build increased density. And we've got to get out of this mindset. We've got to create villages. We've got to increase densities along transportation corridors. There is housing opportunities in the unincorporated. It's not as great as it's going to be in the incorporated areas, but there are things we can do. But we've just got us. We're fighting these like 1970 battles, and it's 2020.
Nora, there are unincorporated areas in your district as well. I mean, it's something you're all going to have to think about.
Yeah. If you look at Bonita, you know, one of the reasons why people love living there is because of the view and what it looks like, and station is key. You know, the fires that we just had recently, I mean, and the impact that it has in the Bonita and all around, I mean, it also impacts our air pollution. And so I think it's important for us to make sure that we are obviously the resources that we need for this when Santana's happened, et cetera, but we have no business in you know, building in areas that are fire zones.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Scott's muted right now.
There you go.
Well, thank you all. Those are great questions, and thank you, Nathan and Nora. Not looking good. 6-2. Padres are down. Getting to the final lap of the game here, but been a great season. Nice to have something to rally for, and you know we've seen them come back before. So thank you both for participating. I know there are a lot of people very interested in these races. Do you want to share anything? I'll give you one last plug of something you think people should look at, or you know, your campaign or whatever. Nora, go ahead.
Oh, I mean, I just want to, you know, everybody, this is the first time in 25 years we have a chance to elect one who has experience in all 3 levels of government, who's actually an executive and has a public healthcare background. And now more than ever, we need someone with that experience on the board who's going to make sure that our communities come first. And, you know, I'll just say, es súper importante que haya alguien que hable el idioma de la comunidad, que sea fronterizo, que conozca esta comunidad para hacer cambio. If we don't have people like us representing who come from our communities, things are never going to change. I'm looking forward to working with Supervisor Fletcher and the rest of the members to make sure that we are building, you know, strong, healthier communities.
And Nathan?
Well, thank you again for everyone.
Let's let Nathan say anything, like website or something. You're not running no campaign thing.
I'm just glad. Look, I'm glad we're talking about the county. And we're talking about county races in a much more robust way than we did previously. And some of that's term limits, but I think the county is rightfully, both when things get done and when things don't get done, there is more attention and focus in the last number of years. It's not just today, but and I think that is an appropriate thing given the size and scope and impact it has on a region. These races matter, and folks are paying attention to them, and I think our region will be better for that.
Well, and if you are interested, we did have a debate. It was a little bit rocky. Former state senator Joel Anderson had a little bit of trouble with his connection, but it was a really interesting conversation between him and Steve Voss. Have either of you made any endorsements on that side, or you have any preference? Okay. Yeah. And Nathan, have you endorsed Vargas, or is that all no endorsement yet?
I have not. I got one prime focus, and that's Tara Lawson-Remer and D3.
Okay.
But I did get the endorsement of some of them are good. I don't know if that matters.
Yeah.
I think she's wonderful. I think she would be a tremendous supervisor. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for everything she's done in her life. And I know she could do a great job as the county supervisor.
So, yeah, so I recommend the other conversation on the second district. Thank you both for joining. And we've got more conversations. We got an interview with Attorney General Javier Becerra. Alon Stevens from the Trace will be doing that. We have a panel on redistricting. These guys are going to have to, or whoever is on the board is going to have to put together a panel for that. There's going to be so many big decisions, and we still have so many conversations to go through. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you again. And please check out or share our website, politifest.org, to get up to date on the other sessions. And if you've enjoyed this, please consider signing up for Scott's politics report that he puts out every day. I included a link, or every week. I included a link in the chat. Thank you, everyone.
Okay,
right,
bye-bye.